In this video, I'm going to tell you about and show you about the top 3 mistakes that you're making when it comes to the lat pull down. So keep in mind that the goal of the lat pull down within this specific context is to train the lats. And with that understanding, the first mistake that people make is gripping too wide. So a lot of people just assume that because the bar is wide and because there's a little bit of a camber in the bar, that you should grip all the way out wide because that's where your hands are supposed to go. But if you think about the anatomy and the mechanics of the lats are a muscle that emerge from the rib cage, right? So the rib cage being right here, if the lats run in and up to the upper arm, they're gonna pull the arm really tight to the body. And so if we want to maximize for stretch and contraction and specificity to the lats in a pull down, then it makes more sense to keep your arms narrow in front of you. So whether that simply means using a chin up grip pull down type thing, whether that means just using a different implement altogether, like a V-bar or something similar, whatever it happens to be, just narrow the grip width of your pull down. And it's likely that just going from wide to narrow automatically will have you feeling your lats and training your lats to a more specific degree. Mistake number 2, and this kind of goes hand in hand with gripping too wide, because when people grip too wide, they tend to do this kind of a thing, which is pulling backward rather than downward. Now, people don't tend to do this if they're already assuming a narrow grip, and so mistake number 2 may automatically sort of be fixed if you have mistake number 1 kind of settled already. But the big thing to remember here with pulling backward as opposed to pulling downward is that if you're using a resistance that is pulling your arms up to the ceiling and you pull in this backward direction, I mean, many of you as you're watching this video, you can sort of just do it along with me, like feel what happens when you pull backward. Really, even if it's backward and downward, like kind of in this direction, right, you're going to be feeling mostly just upper back related tissues. So this will include the rear delts, the teres major, and things like the traps and the rhomboids, all that upper back stuff that is really precisely trained with a wider grip pull down that ends up being a little bit more backward than downward. In essence, you're basically taking what should be more of a vertical pulling motion and you're simply just turning it into this horizontal thing. And so as we're going through lat pull down related motions, we really want to make sure that we're specifically moving in the up to down direction. Again, when it comes to the actual pull down motion, lats can get trained with rowing type motions, and that's perhaps a different story. But when we're talking about pull downs, we want to think about not moving backward, but moving downward, again, because that's sort of where the lats are going to contract and pull the arms, but also because that is where the resistance is actually resisting us in the first place. And so the third and final mistake is not moving the scapula, right? So the lats, for those of you who don't know, move the entire shoulder girdle, right? So what that means is this might be considered just shoulder motion, like motion of this ball and socket thing many of you might have heard of, but this is shoulder girdle motion, and oftentimes they occur simultaneously. And the lats specifically are very, very good when your arms are in this overhead position at pulling your shoulder girdle down to the floor. Think about it like a reverse of a shrug. And when people restrict the scapula, as is commonly taught, what you're doing is you're directly taking away influence from the lat's ability not only to lengthen, but then subsequently contribute to the actual pull down motion. And so one of the things that I like to say, and I've mentioned this in other videos, is that when it comes to lat training, I like to think about lat training primarily like it's an armpit dominant thing. And so allowing the armpit to shrug up toward the top of the pull down and then driving the armpit down toward the ground and into the floor as you pull down, again, assuming that you're not gripping too wide and also that you're not pulling backward. And so if you allow your shoulder blades to move, you allow the shoulder blades to shrug as you get to the top and then reversing that shrug as you pull down toward the bottom. If you make sure that you're pulling downward in tandem with that, and if you make sure that you're gripping narrow and not wide, that is a recipe for success for any lat dominant pull down.